Okay, gentlemen, this tutorial is for the ZOHD Kopilot. It's a flight controller with stabilization feature and return to home and launch assist. And the reason I'm doing this video is because although there are other videos how to install the ZOHD Kopilot, none of them addressed how to do it with the FlySky FS 6 transmitter, either the eSheen version or the FlySky version. They're both the same. Okay, so this tutorial is for those of you that, and not just, this tutorial will not only work for the FlySky, but any type of transmitter that you have that works on PWM. If your transmitter is and your receiver is more up to date and a little bit more pricey, you probably have the S-Bus feature where you can plug one cable from your receiver into the S-Bus port of the ZOHD, and you're good to go. Now, however, since we're going to talk about the eSheen and the FlySky FS 6, we're going to set this up, or again, other radio systems that don't have the S-Bus, we can do this. There are going to be a couple of examples that won't work. For example, my neighbor wanted to have this installed for return to home feature, cheapest insurance you can buy for 40 bucks. But unfortunately his radio is a Tactic, and the fail-safe is in the receiver and not in the radio. That is a prerequisite of being able to do this PWM setup. Your radio must be capable of setting up the fail-safe in your radio so you can set fail-safe to channel 5. Okay? So now what we're going to do, and one more thing while we're at it, just for those of you that may have the FlySky FS 6 and not aware, this B version of the receiver, it costs a couple of bucks more, but these are the ones you want to use because they have a far better range. I get a 1.5 mile range on mine, and I've got a lot of noise in my area. There's guys on the internet that have gotten 3 kilometers. There's actually one guy on YouTube that's got 5 kilometers. You can look that up in YouTube. Now, he had a best case scenario. He had his radio way up in the air on a tripod. He was flying out over the ocean off a 100-foot cliff where there was no noise, and he was able to get 5 kilometers. So that's without any long distance gear. These radios actually have more distance and range than people give them credit for. But regardless, and more importantly, because you can have that kind of range, the return home feature is kind of a really good insurance policy. So let's get on with this, and I'm going to show you what you need to do here. Okay, so I've already pre-wired some of this to make it easy. Now, in this tutorial, I'm setting mine up for a flying wing, and since that's the most difficult to do, this tutorial is going to pertain mostly to the flying wing. It's the same setup for V-tail or T-tail. However, you'll just make one different setting, just a different choice. Okay, so you're going to plug your GPS into the GPS port right here. You're going to put your speed controller in channel 3. You want your left servo in your elevator, and you want your your right servo in your elevator and your left servo in your aileron. Then the next thing you're going to do is you're going to take your, this is your calibration tool, and you're going to plug it in where it says settings, and it can only go one way. Get that tape out of the way. Yeah, darn. I taped this down so that it won't move around. There we go. so that I can test this for you and you can see this working. I've got this taped down to a piece of foam core so we can actually tilt the board around. Alright, so we've got the potentiometers and the setup board plugged into settings. We've got the GPS plugged into GPS. You've got your aileron elevator on your 2 servos and your speed controller on channel 3. Now you've also got this plug in, and this one plugs into the PWM port. And here's the part where we pay attention to on the FlySky receiver. Okay, first channel, second channel, third channel, fourth channel, and then channel 5. All right, they're the ones we're going to pay attention to. So this jack here, you'll notice, has got one extra wire, and it's wider than the normal plugs that you're familiar with, and that's where we're going to have the difference in this setup. Is it's just a little different than most. So the white wire facing outside, you go to the top row of pins right here, not the sensors and the iBus up top, but the actual first row here, and we're going to plug it in unconventionally sideways. Metal tangs look facing upwards, white wire facing you, and plug that in like so. Okay, and then you take the other end and you plug it in a normal way you would plug in any servo, white wire on top, black wire on the bottom, and you plug it in right beside this on channel 5. Okay, can you see that now? And then the next thing we need to do before we go any further is we need to talk about your plane and your transmitter. Now the first thing you got to do is take your plane out. Before you even get this far, you need to take your plane out and fly it. Get your plane trimmed out so that it responds well, flies well, you know it, and you're comfortable with it. For if you take a brand new plane and install a flight controller, you won't know whether you've made a mistake by adjusting the aileron and elevator gain potentiometer to make it too sensitive and your plane's pitching and rolling, or did you do a lousy job with your build and your CG's off. So it's most important that you fly your plane first and get it trimmed out. The next thing I will tell you to save a lot of time for yourself is actually writing down the trim numbers. Now to get into setup mode on knee machines a little different than FlySky. I got to press both of these trim tabs inwards and then boot it up. And now what I'm talking about here is your right here. If you had to give it that much aileron, right aileron, I want you to count the number of clicks you had to input to make your fly level and get trimmed out. I want you to remember this and write this down. And after you've done that, I want you to center that. Well, it doesn't really matter if you center it because the next step will take care of it. In any case, write down those trim settings. Okay, it's time to program the radio. So I want you to go into your settings. Model select. I want you to choose a model that's not been used before, or one that you don't mind erasing. And go toggle down here to model reset. And we're going to wipe this sucker clean just in case there's something in there that setting that you've got. It has to be a brand new clean model. So press OK. Press up. Whoops. Cancel. Model reset. Press OK. Are you sure? Yes. Okay, that model's been wiped out. Now I want you to go over to settings, click OK, scroll down to auxiliary channels, and you'll see channel 5 is set to a variable switch A. We need to change that, so press the down button, the up button, and get the switch A. This is switch, let's see, we need to get to this switch here, the 3 position switch, and you need to get it in the very upmost position. That is -100, and I'll explain that in a bit. In any case, we want to go, there's SWB, SWC, there it is, and it's in the upmost position. Now press down and hold the cancel button to save. Okay, we've got that. And now that we've got that, well, let's go back over to settings, press OK. We're going to come down here to RX setup, press OK, and come down to failsafe and press OK. Come down to channel 5, press OK, press up to turn it on. And again, make sure that you are in the upmost position. See how that changes? Sender is neutral. That's down is positive 100, but we need all the way up negative 100. So put that switch all the way up. Press and hold cancel to save. And you see it right there, channel 5, negative 100. Click cancel. Now go back in just to double check. And we didn't get it, see? I buggered up. So come down. That's why you double check. Okay. Press on. Now press and hold cancel. 100% off. Press and hold cancel. There we go. Now go in and check it again, and you can see we've got it this time. Channel 5, 100% negative. Alright. The reason we want that 100% negative is that's the uppermost toggle on this switch here, this repossession switch, and the uppermost position is our return to home switch. Alright, so now we want to get out of, well, let me see. No, there's nothing in here. We're good. Get out of here. Get out of here. Dual rates we'll come back and talk about in a bit. Okay, I want you to look at this because I'm sure you're going to know about this and you're going to want to jump to this and set your plane for Elevon or VTEL. Ignore that. We are setting up this for all planes, no matter what they are, the default a T-tail, standard rudder and elevator. Your ZOHD Kopilot will do the mixing from now on. Don't worry about it. Just leave that alone. Don't touch those. Okay, and we're good. Let's just get out of here. And now, because we've wiped that model memory clean, we're going to have to bind. So get your bind key out and plug your bind key in and get ready to bind your radio to your receiver. Okay, you get your bind plug and you go up to the top where it says B/VCC. You plug in your binding plug, power up your system, get your transmitter, press the little bind button down right here, and then power up, binding OK. Pull the bind plug, power your system down. I like to power my transmitter back down again, repower the transmitter, power it back up, and we should be okay. And we have control. But you can see here we have an issue with servos are reversed. So at this point in time now, we'll deal with that right now. I'm going to have to shut this off. Hang on. Okay. My servos were reversed, so let's go to setup. Reverse. And channel 1, I'm going to reverse it, and channel 2, I'm going to reverse it. We're going to press and hold, cancel out of that, and let's go ahead now and power up our system again. And we'll give it a moment to boot up. And there we have it. Now we have it reacting. Although, well, it wasn't stabilized. And we have throttle. There you go. We have it. And we'll give it a little throttle. There we go. Now I'm going to tell you this. If you don't get throttle when you do that, it could be your speed controller. I'm not the only one who found this, but I had no throttle. And I do recall reading in all the pages and pages of information I've read about this, other guys started complaining about having no throttle, and the guys came to the conclusion that some ESCs were not compatible with the system, and so I changed out this Hobbywing $10 cheapy 30 amp ESC, and I replaced it with another cheapy one, a $12 Hobbywing Skywalker. It's a 40 amp, and it works. I also know for a fact that the Volantix Ranger ESC, it also works with this. So if it doesn't give you, if everything else is working, but you don't have throttle, swap out one of your ESCs. Okay, let's set up our ZOHD Kopilot. So power up your transmitter, then power up your system here, and the first thing we need to do is look at these lights right here, and what that 3-position switch we programmed for channel 5, the middle position is manual mode. Pull it down 1 and you've got 2 green and 1 red flashing. That is stabilization mode. When in manual mode, you will only see the red light. Mine happens to be flashing at the moment because it's searching for satellites. When it stops flashing and it's a solid red, it has a lock. Now we're going to switch from manual mode, switch down into stabilized mode, and that's 2 green lights. And then we'll click the switch all the way up, and that's 2 green lights flashing on and off. That is your return to home mode, or the launch assist, if you will. And you've got 2 green and 1 red flashing. That is stabilization mode. This is the mode that we do our setups in. Now, we press and hold, and you've got 1 green light and 1 red light, and let's see, 1 constant on, 1 off. That's a V-tail setup. Press this set button again, and it changes over to a T-tail setup, press the button again, and now we've got 2 green lights with the red flashing light, and that's the one I want, and that is for a flying wing. I want you to pull the switch down to position 3, and that it gives you 2 green lights and 1 red light flashing. Again, we're in stabilization mode. Now, what we're going to do now is we're going to pull both sticks down and in and hold it to the count of 5. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, and let it go. That calibrated the sticks to the ZOHD. Okay, now the next thing, by now that red light should have stopped flashing. I do my hobby work in a 35-foot travel trailer. Don't have the room in the house, so I'm in an aluminum travel trailer with a steel roof over it. I cannot get a signal here. I have to go outside to make this actually get the GPS actually work. And we'll get to that later, but okay. You can see the red GPS light is now solid, no longer flashing. And what I'm going to do now is, I'm in manual mode. I've got a little bit of throttle there. I'm going to kick it down into, and there we are. We have throttle. We're down in stabilization mode. And this plane thinks it's flying itself now. Maintaining throttle, heading, altitude, etc. Now, I'm not going to kick it into return to home mode, otherwise it's going to spool up real fast and try to get up to try to fly up to 70 meters, and apparently it's got a pretty good throttle clip it runs at. Now, so I don't want to do that. It'll just jump right off this board here. Okay, now, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to test here. We're in stabilized mode, and we're going to pick this up, and I want you to watch our elevons. I'm going to tilt up, down, and they are reacting. One up, one down, and they are reacting. Okay, so at this point we're going to say that this is looking good. They're reacting as they should. A little too much, but we're going to adjust that with our screwdriver and our potentiometer here. I have deliberately exaggerated the movements on this, okay? I did that so that you could see it, so there would be no misconception that it in fact is doing its job. And what you'll actually do is, when you're looking at your your little pots here, your potentiometers here, 12 o'clock will be neutral for your aileron. If you go clockwise, you turn it clockwise, that will give you a little bit more movement on the down stroke, or if you go anti-clockwise past 12 o'clock, it'll give you a little bit more movement on the upstroke. Okay, and the same thing with your elevator. And so at this point here, all I can tell you is, when you get all your gear installed in your model, I would suggest you set your rates for minimal so that they're not huge swings like this. Otherwise, your model may start oscillating, going up real violently, reacting to wind currents or whatever. I would suggest minimal throws, and we'll get there when I actually put this gear in the model. I'll show you that as well. But we want minimum movements on here for our first test flight. We don't want that to be a bad experience. So you can always increase it a little bit more. But if you had too much in the beginning and things got away from you, it could cause bad things to happen, and we don't want that. All right, so now the next thing you're going to do is you're going to decide whether you want to use the geofencing or do you want to set it for return to home. Me, I want return to home. The whole idea of this is so I can go FPV. Now, anything between all the way counterclockwise to all the way around to, say, 2 o'clock, that's geofencing. And the more you turn it, and the more you turn this, wrong one, the more you turn this, increase it, the larger the area you're allowed to fly. in your geofencing. Crank it all the way around full, and you're in return to home mode, which is what I want, so I'm going to leave that there. Now the next thing you're going to do, and again, we still have to be down in the third position in stabilized mode. That's 2 green lights and 1 red. The next thing you're going to want to do is we're going to assume that this is in your model right now. And if you find that your model flew level, then you can proceed with the next step. Most models have a little bit of up trim, so if you need to put something underneath your model just to lift the nose a little bit, so be it. And then what you do is you get your controller again and you press the set button for the count of 3. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. Let go. And when the ailerons activate on their own, that's them calibrating themselves again with your ZOHD. And at that point, I'm ready to put this in my model. One other thing I can tell you about is you've got a blue light flashing here on the GPS. And when it locks, it also begins with a flashing red light. Ignore that. It's this red light here. When it stops flashing and goes solid, that's when you're locked on and you are good to go. Which brings me to a point. You do not want to charge the system and boot it up until you're at the flying site, because if you were to boot it up now and then go for a 10-minute hike before you launched your plane, it would think home was back at the beginning of the 10-minute hike and it would fly back there. So keep that in mind. You plug this in at your flying site and at the flying site only. Okay, gentlemen, you'll remember I had you write down those trim settings. Well, now's your time. You go back and add those trim settings in while you're in manual mode. That's your center position on your button here. Go to your center position, manual mode, and input your trim settings that you had. And fly your plane around. And while you're flying your plane around, you're doing your best to get it to fly level, paying attention to, is the plane diving, losing altitude when it's flying level, or is it climbing? And once you've got it trimmed again, and you've determined whether it's climbing, diving, or flying level, we want to come back to our ZOHD Kopilot again. You're going to plug in your board one more time. Boot up your system. And we just got to wait for it to the ZOHD to lock on. There we go. Wait till we get throttle. And there's our throttle. It's locked on. Alright, now you've flown your plane, you've landed it, and you've added your trim. The last thing to do is consider now, did your plane dive a little bit? If it did, add a little bit more. Just add a little bit more underneath the nose of the plane to lift it up a little bit. Come back to your calibration tool again. Throw your switch down into the third position, which is stabilized mode, how we do all our programming, and hold and press this button again for 3 seconds, one more time, then let go. We're calculating and locked in. And now the reason why we did this again was because the trim settings that you've put in here. As you put those trim settings in now, the ZOHD Kopilot sees those trim settings as inputs as the plane trying to fly right or left, whatever it was you were correcting for. So consequently, the problem now is the ZOHD's always going to fight it. But once you do this one more time, it will take into account those trim settings, calculate them in, and no longer will be fighting that, and will consider the plane now flying true and level with your trim inputs actually put into your computer. Okay, so another thing I need to tell you now, you've brought it back down, you've done your final adjustments, you think you're all okay in here. What you need to do is, when you think you've got everything dialed in, micro adjustments over here on your elevators and rudder and such, you need to pull out your potentiometers while it's still running, then power down, and then boot back up in order to save the settings. If you don't remove this while it's powered up and then kill the power or reboot, apparently it reverses your settings sometimes. That's not a good thing. And we don't want that. So you can see all my settings are correct still. That's right turn, left turn, pull back, push down, and a little bit of throttle. So it saved all my settings. Now the last thing we're going to do is we're going to go to setup again and go to dual rates, and that's our channel up here, switch here. See how it says normal and sport. In the normal mode, cut your rates down. I'm using a flying wing. I'm going to set mine at 65. My exponential at 30. Channel 2. My rates again at 65. Whoop. My rates at 30. Now toggle your switch up for sport. Whoops. And give yourself some exponential on that as well. Leave your rates at 100. Come back to channel 1. Come down to exponential and add some exponential in there. Alright, so normal 65 and 30, high 130. Channel 1. Now we're going to go to channel 2. Again, sport rates 100, normal flying 65. Press and hold cancel to save it. And we're done. Go fly. Keep your wings upright. And just be real careful testing out your flight control in the beginning. Always start off in manual mode and go to stabilize first, and then be very careful when you go into return to home mode. Hope this has been of any help to you guys. I'm anxious to get my plane in the air. I said that I would make a video and show you this flying. I'm going to be honest with you. It's been a long, hard road to get here. I bought a Tyrannus and the long-range module so I can fly out up to possibly 10 kilometers. I'm not looking for that far, however, that's what they claim. And I'm anxious to do that. I've got several planes I've built. I'm wanting to go long range very badly. I've got everything here, and this was the last thing holding me up. I needed my insurance policy to get me home in the event that my FPV gear failed and or my radio link failed. I wanted this thing to come home. So I'm going to be apologizing now to tell you that I'm not going to put this in the wing and fly it with this FlySky configuration. You can see it already works. As I said earlier, I can't even help you from this point. Every plane is different. I can't stand there beside you, watch how your plane's reacting, and tell you how to micromanage this potentiometer tool here. Pretty much on your own. So just like I'm going to be. So I'm anxious. Like I said, I'm anxious to get long range. So I'm going to hook this I'm going to hook this guy up with my Tyrannus and my R9 gear so I can go long range. I'll make a video of that for you. It doesn't matter what radio I use, it's all the same. I just wire them up differently. And at some point, you might want to get brave. And as you're flying, kick it into, leave it in manual mode. And while it's up in the air, with plenty of altitude, kill the power. And see if it starts to actually fail safe and return to home. I know it's a gamble on this one. Okay, gentlemen, I was just kidding. Here's what you do to test. You don't have to go wild and flip it into return to home mode. Alright, so solid light, we're in manual mode. Stabilize. I just lost my signal, but regardless, all you got to do is this. Leave it in manual mode, which it is now, and kill the power. Still connected. Kill the power to your radio. And if it goes into green, you're good. And there you go. It defaulted into channel 5, which is return to home. So that is with my radio turned off. And just to give you a little comfort, welcome to OpenTX. As well. Manual mode. Low rate. It went back into manual mode during the boot up mode. And that didn't take very long. You still may not have a prop yet, but yeah, you do. Okay. So in any case, there you go. That's how you can test it before you blindly try return to home mode, okay? But there is another function of this that I would talk about because I do know a little bit about it, and it's the launch assist. Now, in order for launch assist to work, you will have your model booted up, your red GPS stops flashing, and your red GPS goes assaulted. That means it's locked on. You crank up your throttle. You crank up your throttle to about half to 3/4 speed, depending on how your model flies. You know what your takeoff speed should be, and put it in return to home mode, and it will not take off without throttle until you chuck that model in the air. The ZOHD Kopilot will read the actual inertia of the model being chucked in the air. The motor will spin up, and then it will start flying up to its return to home altitude and begin doing a circle pattern in your vicinity, over your head, until you click it into manual mode and take over and start flying your plane. Very nice feature. It's especially if you're flying FPV. Gives you ample opportunity to get all your gear situated, ensure your ground station has a good view before you put your goggles down on, etc., etc. Any case, enjoy. Keep your wings up.